It was a quiet evening, the kind of evening where the air feels still, like it's holding its breath. I had just finished watering the jasmine plants outside my porch. I remember the scent sweet calming. I was humming a tune from my youth, something my mother used to sing when she braided my hair. That's when I felt it, a sharp, crushing pain at the back of my head. Like lightning, but colder. Then everything went black. I don't remember falling. I don't remember hitting the ground. Just silence. A deep, endless silence. When I opened my eyes, I wasn't in my house. I wasn't even in a hospital. I was surrounded by darkness. Cold, damp earth pressed against my skin. My body was stiff, my breath shallow. I tried to move, but the weight of the soil above me held me down. That's when I realized I was buried. Buried. I screamed, but no sound came out. My throat was dry, my chest tight. I could hear muffled voices above me, crying, prayers. Someone saying, "She was a good woman." Another voice, my son-in-law, saying, "She's at peace now." Peace. I was buried alive. I don't know how long I lay there. Minutes? Hours? Time didn't exist in that place. Just fear and betrayal. Then, out of nowhere, the soil around me began to glow. A soft white light, like moonlight filtered through fog. Two figures appeared dressed in flowing white cloth, faces calm but unreadable. They didn't speak at first. They just looked at me. Not with pity, not with fear, but with something else. Something ancient. One of them knelt beside me and whispered, "Your time is not done." I tried to speak, but my voice was weak. Who are you?" The other one answered, "We are the ones who walk between endings and beginnings." I didn't understand. I didn't care. "Who hit me?" I asked. "Who did this?" They looked at each other, then back at me. "Your son-in-law. He wanted your house. Your money. He thought no one would question your death. He thought grief would silence truth." I felt my heart twist. My own family. My daughter's husband. The man who smiled at me every Eid. Who called me Emmy with warmth. He had buried me. The first figure reached out and touched my forehead. The pain faded. My limbs loosened. The soil above me began to shift, as if the earth itself was letting me go. "You may return," they said. "But you must walk with purpose." Not rage. I nodded. I didn't want revenge. I wanted truth. I wanted justice. The next thing I knew, I was standing outside the grave. The cemetery was empty. The moon hung low, casting silver shadows across the tombstones. My clothes were torn, my hair matted with dirt. I looked like a ghost. Maybe I was. I walked slowly. Each step felt like a memory. The road to my house was quiet, but not peaceful. Something in the air had changed. As I approached the gate, I heard music, laughter, clinking glasses. A party. On the night of my funeral, I stood at the door and knocked. Once, twice, no one answered. I knocked again. Harder. Finally, the door creaked open. My son-in-law stood there holding a drink. His eyes met Manand, widened. His mouth dropped open. The glass slipped from his hand and shattered on the floor. He screamed. A dead body. A dead body is walking. Guests inside turned toward the door. Some gasped. Some screamed. One woman fainted. They ran through the back, through the kitchen. Some even jumped over the garden wall. Like rats fleeing a sinking ship. I stepped inside, slowly, calmly. The house smelled of perfume and roasted meat. Balloons still floated near the ceiling. A banner read, "Celebrating Life." I looked at it and smiled. Irony has a strange sense of timing. My son-in-law backed away, trembling. You're not real." I didn't answer. I walked past him, straight to the bathroom. I turned on the tap, washed the dirt from my face, combed my hair. I changed into a fresh shalwar kameez from my old cupboard. It still smelled like rose water. Then I picked up the phone and dialed the police. "Hello," the officer said. "Yes," I replied. "I'd like to report a crime. Attempted murder. And fraud." There was silence on the line. "Then who is speaking?" I paused. Then said the woman they buried today. The officer didn't speak for a moment. I could hear the static on the line, the hesitation in his breath. Ma'am, did you say you were buried today? Yes, I said calmly. And I'm standing in my living room right now. There was a pause. Then a quiet, we're sending someone. I hung up and sat down on the edge of the sofa. The cushions were still warm from the guests who had fled. A half-eaten slice of cake sat on the table. Vanilla, my favorite. I stared at it for a long time, then pushed it away. The house was silent now. My son-in-law had locked himself in the bedroom. I could hear him pacing, muttering to himself, "It's not real. It's not real." I didn't care. I walked to the mirror in the hallway. My reflection stared back holder. Yes, tired but alive. My eyes were red, not from death, but from everything I had seen. Everything I had felt. The betrayal. The burial. The truth. The doorbell rang. Two officers stood outside, flashlights in hand. One of them blinked when he saw me. Are you? I'm the woman they buried, I said. Come in. They stepped inside slowly, cautiously. I could see the doubt in their eyes. One of them whispered to the other, "She looks fine." I handed them the phone I had used. Call the hospital. Ask for my death certificate. You'll find it was signed without a proper examination. They did. And just as I said, the report was vague. No autopsy. No confirmation. Just a signature from a family doctor, one who happened to be a close friend of my son-in-law. The officers looked at each other. One of them asked, "Can you tell us what happened?" I nodded and began to speak. I told them everything. The blow to the head. The darkness. The grave. The two figures in white. The truth they revealed. I didn't expect them to believe the supernatural part. I didn't need them to. I just needed them to see the facts. They listened, took notes, asked questions. And then they asked the one thing I had been waiting for. Where is your son-in-law now? I pointed to the bedroom door. They knocked. No answer. They knocked again. Still nothing. Then one of them turned the knob. It was locked. Double quote, "Sir, this is the police. Open the door." Silence. "Open the door or we'll break it." A few seconds later, the door creaked open. My son-in-law stood there, pale as a sheet. His eyes darted between me and the officers. "She's dead," he whispered. "She's supposed to be dead. She's very much alive," one officer said. "And she's made serious allegations against you." He didn't speak, just stared at me. I stared back. They asked him to sit down. He did reluctantly. They began questioning him about the night of the incident, about the funeral, about the doctor. His answers were shaky, inconsistent. He kept glancing at me, as if hoping I'd vanish. I didn't. The officers asked me if I had any medical records. I nodded. I keep everything in the cabinet near the kitchen. They retrieved the file. Inside were my last few checkups, all showing stable health. No signs of illness. No reason for sudden death. One officer turned to my son-in-law. "Why did you report her dead?" Asterisk, he stammered. She wasn't breathing." "Did you call an ambulance?" "No." "Did you check her pulse?" I panicked. They didn't say anything, just wrote it all down. I stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the moon was still watching. I whispered to it, "I'm not done." The officers said they'd return in the morning with a formal team. They needed to verify everything, speak to the doctor, and gather statements from the guests. I nodded before they left. One of them turned to me and said, "You're lucky." I smiled. Luck had nothing to do with it. After they left, I sat in the living room again. My son-in-law stayed in the bedroom, door shut. I didn't care. I wasn't afraid of him anymore. I picked up my phone and opened the camera. I looked into the lens and pressed record. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted, someone you loved, don't stay silent. I was buried alive, but I came back. Not for revenge. For truth. I paused. If this story moved you, like and subscribe to Valvet Revenge. There's more to come. I ended the recording and saved it. Then I walked to my bedroom, lay down and closed my eyes. Not to sleep. To plan. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the silence that had replaced the party. My son-in-law didn't come out of the bedroom. I didn't care. I wasn't afraid anymore. I was planning the next morning. The police returned this time with a full team. They brought a forensic expert, a legal officer, and a quiet man in a gray suit who introduced himself as an investigator from the district office. They didn't waste time. They asked questions, took photos, examined the spot where I had fallen. They even visited the graveyard to inspect the burial site. I watched them work. Focused. The officer who had spoken to me the night before pulled me aside. "Ma'am, we've confirmed that no proper medical procedure was followed. The doctor who signed your death certificate is under review. We'll need you to come to the station for a formal statement." I nodded. "I'll come." Before leaving, I walked into the living room and looked around. The decorations from the party were still hanging. I pulled down the banner that read "Celebrating Life" and folded it neatly. I didn't know why. Maybe I wanted to keep it as a reminder. Or maybe I wanted to burn it later. At the station, I sat across from the investigator. He was polite but firm. "Can you walk me through everything again?" he asked. I did. From the moment I felt the blow to the moment I knocked on my own door. I left out the supernatural part. I knew it would sound unbelievable. I focused on the facts. The betrayal. The burial. The motive. He listened carefully, taking notes. When I finished, he leaned back and said, "This is one of the strangest cases I've ever seen." "It's not strange," I said. "It's selfish. It's cruel. But it's not strange." He nodded. "We'll be filing charges. Attempted murder, conspiracy, and fraud. But we'll need your cooperation." "You'll have it," I said. When I returned home, my daughter was waiting outside. Her eyes were swollen, her hands trembling. "Emmy?" she whispered. I didn't speak. She stepped forward. "I didn't know. Swear." "He told me you collapsed. That you were gone." I didn't question it. I should have. "I'm sorry." I looked at her. My heart was torn. She was my child. But she had stood beside the man who buried me. "I don't blame you," I said. "But I need you to understand this isn't just about me. It's about what we allow. What we ignore." She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I want to help." I led her inside. We sat together quietly. She told me how things had changed over the past year. How her husband had become controlling. How he had started talking about inheritance, property, and moving forward. She said she thought it was just stress. Just talk. I told her it was a plan. That evening, I visited my lawyer. He was an old friend, someone I trusted. I handed him my documents and said, "I want to update everything. My will, my property, my accounts." He looked at me, surprised. "You're serious?" "I was buried yesterday," I said. "I've never been more serious. We spent hours going through papers. I've removed my son-in-law from every document. I added my daughter, but with conditions. I wanted her to prove she had changed. I wanted her to earn it. When I returned home, I sat in the garden. The jasmine plants were still blooming. I touched one gently and whispered, "I'm still here." That night, I recorded another video. I want to speak to every woman who's ever been silenced. Every mother who's been pushed aside. Every elder who's been told they're no longer useful. I was buried, but I came back. Not for revenge. For truth. For dignity. I paused. If you believe in justice, in stories that matter, like and subscribe to Valvet Revenge. Let's make sure no one buries the truth again. I posted the video and went to bed. The next morning, the police called. They had arrested my son-in-law. He was being held for questioning. The doctor who signed the certificate had confessed he was pressured, paid. I felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. Relief that justice was moving. Sadness that it had come to this. I visited the station. My son-in-law was in a holding cell. He looked at me through the bars, eyes hollow. "You ruined everything," he said. I stepped closer. "No, you did." He didn't speak again. I walked out of the station, the sun warm on my face. I felt alive, not just physically, but emotionally, spiritually. I wasn't done. The walk from the police station to my house felt different this time. Not because the sun was brighter or the air warmer, but because I was no longer walking as someone who had been buried. I was walking as someone who had returned, someone who had spoken, someone who had been heard. When I reached the gate, I paused. The jasmine plants swayed gently in the breeze. I touched one and whispered, "We're not done yet." Inside, my daughter was waiting. She had cleaned the living room, taken down the decorations, and folded the tablecloth. The house smelled of tea and quiet regret. "I made chai," she said softly. I nodded and sat down. She poured a cup and placed it in front of me. Her hands were still trembling. "I don't know how to fix this," she said. "You start by not pretending it didn't happen," I replied. She nodded, tears forming again. "I want to stand with you." I looked at her. She was my child. She had made mistakes, but she was trying. That mattered. "We'll take it one step at a time," I said. That afternoon, I visited my lawyer again. We finalized the changes to my will. I added a clause in one who attempted to harm me or manipulate my estate would be permanently removed from all rights. My lawyer raised an eyebrow. "Isn't that a bit dramatic?" Smiled. So was being buried alive. He didn't argue. I returned home and sat at my desk. I opened my laptop and began writing. Not a legal document. Not a complaint. A story. My story I wrote about the night I was attacked. The silence of the grave. The two figures in white. The truth they revealed. I wrote about the walk back home. The party. The screams. The bath. The call to the police. I wrote about the investigation. The arrest. The courtroom waiting ahead. I didn't write it for sympathy. I wrote it for every woman who had been silenced. Every elder who had been pushed aside. Every soul who had been told they were no longer needed. When I finished, I recorded a voiceover and paired it with images: my garden, my house, the empty party table, the police station. I edited it slowly, carefully. I wanted every frame to speak. Then I uploaded it. The title was simple: They Buried Me Alive. I came back within hours. Ha! The views started climbing. Comments poured in. People from all over the country, women, men, young, old, writing things like, "I cried watching this. My grandmother went through something similar. This is the most powerful story I've heard in years. Justice must be louder than betrayal." I sat back and watched. Not for fame, not for numbers, but for connection. That evening, I received a call from a local journalist. She had seen the video and wanted to interview me. I agreed. She arrived the next morning with a small camera crew. She was young, sharp-eyed, and respectful. "Can you tell us what gave you the strength to come back?" she asked. I looked into the camera and said, "I didn't come back with strength. I came back with truth. And truth is stronger than anything." The interview aired that night. More messages came in. More support. More stories. Women who had been cheated out of property. Elders who had been manipulated. Families torn apart by greed. I realized something. This wasn't just my story anymore. It was a mirror that night. I recorded another message. To everyone watching this, if you've ever felt buried by betrayal, know this: you can rise. You can speak. You can reclaim your story. I paused. If this story moved you, like and subscribe to Valvet Revenge. Let's keep telling the stories they tried to silence. I posted it and went to bed. The next morning, my lawyer called. "The court date is set." "Next week?" I nodded. "I'll be there." The days leading up to the hearing were quiet but heavy. My daughter stayed close. We talked more than we had in years. She told me about her fears, her regrets, her hopes. I listened. I didn't judge. I just listened. The night before the hearing, I stood in my garden again. The jasmine was blooming stronger than ever. I looked up at the sky and whispered, "I'm ready." The courtroom smelled like old wood and tension. I sat in the front row, dressed in a simple beige shalwar kameez. No jewelry, no makeup, just me. The woman they buried, the woman who came back. My daughter sat beside me, her hands folded tightly in her lap. She hadn't spoken much that morning. I understood. Some silences are heavy with shame, others with resolve. Across the room, my son-in-law sat behind the defendant's table. He looked thinner, paler. His eyes darted around the room like a trapped animal. He didn't look at me, not once. The judge entered. Everyone stood, then sat. The proceedings began. The prosecutor laid out the case: attempted murder, falsified death declaration, fraudulent property claims. He spoke clearly, methodically. He presented the medical report, the lack of autopsy, the rushed burial. He showed the video footage from the party, the decorations, the guests, the celebration held on the same day I was buried. Then he played my video, the one I had recorded in my living room, the one where I said I was buried alive. But I came back. The courtroom was silent. The defense tried to argue panic, confusion. They said my son-in-law thought I was dead and acted out of fear. They said he didn't mean harm, that he was overwhelmed. I stood when they asked me to testify. I walked to the witness stand slowly, each step echoing in the room. I looked at the judge, then at the jury, then at my son-in-law. "I want to tell you what it feels like to wake up in a grave," I said. The room leaned in. It's cold. It's dark. You can't move. You can't breathe. You hear people crying above you and you realize they're crying for you. But you're not gone. You're still here. And someone put you there. I paused. I didn't come back with rage. I came back with truth. And truth is louder than any lie. I told them about the night I was attacked, the funeral, the party, the knock on the door, the screams, the police, the investigation. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I just spoke when I finished. The courtroom was silent again. The judge thanked me and asked me to return to my seat. The trial continued for hours. Witnesses came forward, guests from the party, neighbors, even the doctor who had signed the certificate. He admitted he had been pressured, that he hadn't checked properly, that he regretted it. My son-in-law didn't speak, not once. When the final arguments were made, the judge said he would deliver the verdict the next morning. We left the courtroom quietly. Outside, reporters waited. Cameras flashed. Microphones reached out. I didn't speak to them. I walked past them, holding my daughter's hand. That night, I sat in my garden again. The jasmine was blooming. The air was still. I recorded one more message. Tomorrow, a man who buried me will hear his fate. But this story isn't about him. It's about every woman who's been silenced, every elder who's been erased, every truth that's been buried. I paused. If you believe in stories that rise from the grave, like and subscribe to Valvet Revenge. Let's keep digging until we find every truth. I posted it and went to bed. The next morning, the courtroom was full. The judge entered. Everyone stood. Then sat. He read the verdict. Guilty. My son-in-law was sentenced to prison for attempted murder, fraud, and conspiracy. The courtroom buzzed with whispers. Some people cried. Some looked stunned. I didn't react. I just stood up and walked out. Outside, the sun was shining. The air was warm. My daughter hugged me tightly. "I'm proud of you," she whispered. I nodded. "We're not done." I didn't cry when the verdict was read. I didn't cheer. I didn't smile. I just stood there, feeling the weight of everything that had happened. The courtroom buzzed with whispers, but I heard none of them. My heart was quiet. My mind was clear. Outside, the sun was warm. My daughter walked beside me, her hand wrapped gently around mine. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. When we reached home, I went straight to the garden. The jasmine was blooming wildly now, as if it had been waiting for this moment. I knelt down and began digging a small hole near the edge of the wall. My daughter watched silently. "What are you doing?" she asked. "Planting something new." I said, "I placed a young sapling into the soil. A neem tree, strong, resilient, healing. This tree will grow with truth," I whispered. "Not with silence." She nodded, tears in her eyes. The days that followed were quiet but full. I started receiving letters, real letters, handwritten, from women across the country. Some were short, thank you for speaking, others were long, filled with stories of betrayal, survival, and strength. I read every single one. One woman wrote, "My son tried to take my land." I stayed silent. But after watching your story, I spoke up. "I'm not afraid anymore." Another said, "I thought I was alone." You reminded me I'm not. I started replying slowly, thoughtfully. I didn't have all the answers, but I had my story. And sometimes that's enough. One evening, I received a call from a local college. They were hosting a seminar on elder rights and wanted me to speak. I hesitated. I wasn't a speaker. I was just a woman who had been buried. But then I remembered the grave, the silence, the knock on the door. I said yes. The auditorium was full. Students, teachers, activists. I stood at the podium, heart pounding, and began. "I'm not here as a victim," I said. "I'm here as a witness to what happens when truth is buried and what happens when it rises." I told them everything: the betrayal, the burial, the return, the trial, the healing. When I finished, the room was silent. Then someone stood. Then another. Then applause. I didn't cry, but my heart did. That night, I recorded one final message. This is the last chapter of my story, but it's the first chapter of something bigger. I was buried alive, but I came back. Not with rage, with truth. And truth doesn't need permission to speak. I paused. If this story gave you strength, like and subscribe to Valvet Revenge. Let's keep telling the stories they tried to silence. I posted it and closed my laptop the next morning. I walked to the garden. The neem sapling had sprouted new leaves. I touched them gently and smiled. I wasn't the same woman who had watered jasmine that night. I was someone else now, someone who had walked through death and come back with life, someone who had been silenced and chose to speak, someone who had been betrayed and chose to heal. I sat on the bench, the breeze brushing against my face, and whispered to the wind, "I'm still here, and I always will be." Asterisk. If you like this story, kindly like and share this story. Also, subscribe my channel Valvet Revenge to V and listen more such engaging stories.